Okay, today I'm speaking with archaeologist, writer, podcaster, sunscreen advocate, wife and basset hound owner, Amanda Hope Haley, the red-headed archaeologist. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and talking to us from Tennessee, I believe.
Yes, Tennessee, where it is 90 degrees outside right now, and we are praying for rain.
Well, it's rather ironic because I live in Cairns, far north Queensland, and it's winter here, and I think because you guys do Fahrenheit, like we're at about
We
20
do.
degrees and it's 8 o'clock in the morning. That's Celsius. I think that's around,
Okay.
I think that's around, well,
Like 70, maybe.
I
I
don't
was
know.
just in Canada about 2 weeks ago, and they do Celsius up there too. And I'm going to be back in Canada here in July. And so I'm trying to learn. I understand it a little bit better than I did, say, a month ago. But it's different. It's different. We definitely do Fahrenheit.
All right. So first question, why archaeology?
Oh, complete and total accident. So I went to a place called Rhodes College for undergrad. It's a Presbyterian university, and they had a requirement that you had to take at least 4 semesters of religion courses, which was fine with me. I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up Southern Baptist, which I'm not sure what that translates to in Australia, but pretty legalistic, conservative denomination here in the States. And anyway, so I took these classes, and the second one I took was biblical archaeology, and I just fell in love with it. And I was really good at it. And I had some amazing professors who were themselves Harvard graduates, and they helped me and they pushed me and they got me scholarships to go dig in Israel, and they helped me get into Harvard. And then when I got there, I worked with some amazing professors who really did the same thing, took me under their wing. And so I think it's just being surrounded by those people really encouraged me that becoming a biblical archaeologist was something that I could do. And so I just went for it. I had the support of my parents, and my husband and I got married in between undergrad and graduate school. And he was so amazing. We got married and he went with me to Harvard, and I've always had a great support system. So once I got over to Israel and I started digging, I could see what was in the ground, and I just fell even more in love with it in spite of the heat and the dust and the tediousness of the work. When you dig down and you're pulling something out, say it's, from the Middle Bronze Age, you're pulling something out that hasn't seen the light of day in 2,500 or 3,000 years, and being able to touch the things that were created by our ancestors brought not only history to life, but for me, but also because I was in Israel and I was working with Philistine sites, it brought the Bible to life for me too. And
Yeah.
so it's just something I love. And later in life, I worked in publishing because of my degree. My degree from Harvard is actually Hebrew scripture and interpretation. And
Yeah.
so when I finished with my master's, I ended up going to work for a publisher called Thomas Nelson. At the time, they were the largest Bible publisher in the world. They've since been acquired by HarperCollins, but they put out a new Bible translation. So out of Harvard, I was really tired after my master's. I ended up getting into publishing, kind of through the back door, and writing books that way. And so now here I am, going to Israel in the summer, at least that's the usual plan, and then writing about it the rest of the year and just sharing my passion with everybody else. I've been so blessed in life to have some of the greatest professors and the best support system in the world. And I just want to share that with people, because so much of what comes out of the academy is scholarly speak, is so very
Yeah.
scientific and very hard to understand. And so I hope that with my work, I'm sort of a bridge between what's happening, what's happening in the universities and what people are actually getting in their churches.
Well, that actually is a fantastic segue into my next question, although I did really want to dig in more actually, no, I will dig in more a little bit on that. You got to tell us how it feel to dig something up and hold in your hands. Describe the feeling for me to dig that up and look at it, and some lamp or something else like that, that was valued and used by
Yeah.
go.
To begin with, when you're digging in Israel, the thing about Israel is they have had continuous civilization there since really the Neolithic times. And when you go out to tells, there are some tells that have had continuous occupation on them from the Neolithic times to the present. And so you can literally be walking on the top of a site like, say, Tel Shimron, which is in Galilee, and just walking, the pressure of your feet will bring pottery up to the surface. Even before you start digging, things will be cast around because it's so prolific there. Well, when you actually start digging, when the grids are laid out and you're going about it in a scientific way, that first day, and the first day of every year, I feel this way every time I've started at a site. It's just so exciting to find that piece of pottery and to look at it and to hold it, and you put it in a bucket and you just keep going. But then by the end of the day, after you've excavated a few hundred pieces of broken pottery, you realize that at the end of the day, you have to wash every single one of those, and you have to evaluate them to see if there's anything you can learn from them, and you have to mark them, and you have to catalog them and do all this. And so by the second day, you're picking up pieces of pottery that you know immediately aren't going to be helpful, and you get a little frustrated because those is going to be so much more work. So the day-to-day drudgery can be difficult, but when you find something that is unique, like a bracelet, many times you will find jewelry and it'll be the beads of a bracelet that the string or the flax or whatever it was that held them together, that's long disintegrated, but the beads themselves are still laying there in the perfect formation. When you see something like that, or my favorite thing that I ever got to excavate was at Tel Ashkelon, which was a Philistine site. It was a late Bronze Age level, and we found what's called a bowl deposit. It was a perfectly preserved bowl, a perfectly preserved lamp that had never been used that was inside that bowl, and then a second bowl that was turned over on top of it. And the Philistines, and actually the Canaanites before them, would do the same thing. They would take that and they would bury it underneath the corner foundation of their homes, as this idea of bringing light and life into the home. And that's the most special thing that I have ever pulled out of the ground. And that was actually during my first season in 2004. Nothing has beat that to this day, because not only were those pieces made by those people, but it was such a sacrifice for them to spend the time and the material to make them, for it to go. And then you're understanding what they were hoping for their family. And then actually not very far from that same family, they had infant burials there. And so you, as you're digging up homes and you're in their kitchen, and microbiologists can come today and they can test scrapings that the normal people like me who do not have 20/20 vision can't even see. They can take scrapings and realize what people were cooking at the time, what they were eating. Beyond, we find the bones, but we can know even more than that. What kind of flora and fauna were they working with in their kitchens? And then of course, if we find burials, you're learning a little bit about the life that they lived there. It's all about the people. It's not about the exceptional things. It's not about finding the Ark of the Covenant or finding any big spectacular thing. It's about connecting with who those people were, who were living in the time when the Bible was being lived out and written, and all of that down through time.
Absolutely, and it's those everyday people stories that, of course, resonate with that people resonate with the most. But you've touched on something very interesting there. Quite clearly, Philistines doing that, like that was a symbolic act. And we don't really live in a symbolic world anymore. Like we live in a very, very forensic, materialistic world. And I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. Like, of course, science is great. I mean, you're practicing it, we all live in that. But I think, I just want to word this correctly. I think you miss something if you just describe something forensically without understanding the meaning and the context behind it. Would you be confident just to discuss that a little bit, to discuss the action between meaning and where meaning and fact can join, I suppose?
That is really important for archaeology. And I would say maybe the very first day of my archaeology class, when I got into grad school, Lawrence Stager was the professor. And the first thing he told us was, when you go onto a dig site, if you look for something, you will find it. And that was cautionary. Because if you go into a site expecting that you know what you're going to find based on your previous interpretation of something else, then you're going to figure out a way to find it sitting there. And so it's important with archaeology that you start off forensically, as you were saying, or scientifically, that you go into it objectively. some amount of hypothesis has to happen to begin with because of where
Yeah, of
you're
course.
digging.
Yeah.
When you go to Israel and you see the tells out along the horizon, you can realize based on geography and writings that, okay, that site is probably X city. And then we can take ground penetrating radar, that sort of thing, and get an idea of what's in a tell just to give us some sort of direction as to where should we start digging.
Yeah.
So some of those assumptions you do make on the front end, they're necessary just to be efficient.
Yeah.
But once you're getting in there, once you're digging down, you need to be almost blind to what you anticipate finding. And everything that happens in the ground needs to be as scientific as possible, so that then afterward you can sit back and then you can look at the breadth of everything that has been dug up, probably over the course of many years, because dig seasons typically in Israel only last about 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And so it can take many, many years to understand everything that happened in one layer in a particular site. So after it's all come out, that's when you want to sit back and then do the work of interpretation. And that is where, like with biblical archaeology, the number one thing that we bring to archaeology as biblical archaeologists is the Bible, the writings of the Bible, as both as a spiritual resource, but also as a historical document, because especially the books of Samuel and Kings, those are the historical records for Israel, the
Yeah.
way that all of the hieroglyphics in Egypt were, and all of that. So we have very few written documents for the land of Israel in comparison with the large empires that were around them. Babylon and Neo-Babylon and the Assyrians, they left so much more as far as writings go. But for Israel, what we have is the Bible. So you do want to put them together, but you want to do that later, not before. You don't want to go looking for something that is in the Bible. You don't want to go on a scavenger hunt trying to find the Ark of the Covenant or something like that. You want to let the land speak first and then do the interpretive work after.
Yeah. And look, I think that pretty much nails it, because
Thanks.
when I discuss this with people, I've got a lot of very materialistic, and I don't mean in the sense of stuff. I mean in the philosophical sense, very materialist thinking people. And the great thing is, we discuss stuff all of the time. The way they try and frame it is that all that biblical archaeology is agenda based, and the answer to that question is yes, but all because there's a hypothesis with everything. Every research fundamentally is agenda based, and you can let that take over your science. And we've arguably, and I don't want to get too controversial, but we've probably seen that in a couple of other we've seen agenda based science manifested in a couple of other
Yes.
And you understand why that undermines the sanctity, I suppose, is the only word really of science as a method of discerning the truth. But you need that interaction, hey? I mean, it's so tough. You have to interplay between the hypothesis, the agenda, and the hypothesis.
That's why I think it's important for that part to come after, for us to keep the science as pure as possible when you're actually doing the digging. You want that, the connection with the Bible and everything to come later. And I actually, just a week or so ago, I was having a conversation with a former professor of mine, and we were talking about how the names of everything are changing right now. So the Oriental Institute, which is the University of Chicago, one of the largest supporters of archaeology in the world for many, many years. Well, over the last few years, they've been changing their names. They're taking the word Oriental out of it, because the vast majority of the population doesn't understand Orient and Occident. They don't know the classical meanings of those words as far as Eastern and Western. And so a debate happens as to, is it easier to educate people about what those words actually mean, or is that a step we don't need to take? And do we just need to change the names of things? Well, so I was saying to that professor, I feel like in the next few years, you're going to see biblical archaeology, you're going to see the name sort of change, because the practice of it, when biblical archaeology began, really when all archaeology began in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it was really people going into Egypt and the Holy Land being grave
Yeah.
robbers, being Indiana Jones types. They
Yeah.
were treasure hunters, and it's good that they found some of the artifacts that they did and they got them out of war-torn areas. There's positive and negative to that, but that's sort of archaeology's original sin, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think the science right now, the people who are involved in it are working so hard to make up for that. And the way the science has advanced, as far as even just when I went in 2004 to when I last went in 2019, when we would find something, we would draw out maps. We had plat maps. If we found something significant, we would put it on there. We would measure things with lines. We use plumb bobs, all of this, do it all manually. Well, by 2019, everything is GPS. And so we have these tools where you find a cool artifact, you touch it with a tool, and it gives you all of the dimensions in 4. It gives you the GPS, it gives you the time that it was found, it gives absolutely everything. That gets fed into a computer. And now, as we're digging up tells, as we're tagging things, the computer is recreating a model of everything, which is awesome. So 20 years down the road, when that tell has been brought down because of archaeology, we're still going to be able to go and look at these computer renderings that were created in real time and see where things are, and maybe reevaluate our assumptions based on things that we've learned from other places. So it's becoming so much more scientific, so fast, but we're still making up for that stigma that gave us, I mean, I'm going to say it, the wonderful stories such as Indiana Jones. I'm a
Yeah.
huge Indiana Jones fan.
Me too.
My husband and I are going to be on vacation in Canada when the film comes out. My husband's already promised me we will go, no matter where we are. I mean, I love him. He's why so many people get excited about archaeology, but what he does is not archaeology in any
No.
sense of the word. It's swashbuckling. It's
Yeah.
it's treasure hunting. It's
He's
all
a
of
grave
that.
robber.
So
He really is
there's
a
this
grave robber.
completely.
Yeah.
Completely, yes.
I
So,
mean,
and
what was Howard Carter one though? Like, I mean, like I said, where do you draw this line? Because for me, it was Howard Carter that drew me in. I always wanted to be an archaeologist.
the I'm all the stuff that he found was great. Archaeology at that point wasn't as scientific. It was around that time that the first way that archaeology started to become scientific was when those original archaeologists realized that the forms of pottery are a way that we can start dating things. It was around that time that people noticed, hey, strata, that's a thing. We can mark these lines and see the difference. And so while you had to have that exploration, you had to have those grave robbers, if you're being a little mean about it, you had to have them doing that discovering for then the people following them to realize, hey, wait, we can put some of these dots together. And this can be about more than just finding the really cool object. We can actually learn about these societies. We can find out about these people. We can find out how they interacted with one another, how trade worked over time, all of that, all the way forward to today, where now we're using DNA out of 3,000-year-old bones from Ashkelon to figure out where the Philistines actually came from. Were they sea peoples? What region of the Adriatic or the Mediterranean did they come from? So it's all part of the story. And the oldest part is part of the lore, but it's also what was so attractive to so many of us as kids. So with anything, I don't ever want to throw the tradition. I don't want to throw that out with the bathwater, but I do think it's important for us to look at that and say, it would have been so much better if instead of just ripping the Rosetta Stone out of where it was found, if they had done the archaeological work around it, and we could have known even more what was going on at that site, but instead of just pulling this one really cool object out of the ground, that would have been better. But they didn't know it then. And so I'm not a person, I don't know, I'm not a person who's judgmental about that kind of thing, but I want to do better. It's important that we do better.
Yeah, look, exactly too. And you think of some of the damage that, Schliemann did to Troy. I mean, oh my God, mea culpa. He probably destroyed he probably destroyed he stuffed up more than he found. But that's not the point. Like I mean, you're stating a fact when you state that, but you miss the point, because without Schliemann, there probably
we would know. And archaeology by definition is a destructive science.
Of
If you're
course.
digging something out,
You're breaking
there's
it.
no putting it back in.
Yeah.
And that's why the computer modeling and everything is so important now. But for one thing that frustrates me about Israel a little bit, and as a Christian, it frustrates me. If you go to some of the sites in Galilee, there are so many places where churches have been built over areas where supposedly something historically significant or biblically significant happened. Well, because those are there, and especially the ones that are, say, from the Byzantine era, so they're from, let's say, around 350 AD, they're standing there. They are themselves relics. They're old enough to be considered archaeology. Byzantine archaeology is a thing, but me, who my specialty was more Iron Age, I'm really interested in like David and Solomon, and that's my sweet spot. That's what I love the best. I want to get under those.
I want to bulldoze that thing.
I want to know what's below it.
But
But you can't. But that's a choice that has to be made in so many of these places. Is like, here are Roman ruins that we as tourists can go visit. There are Roman ruins, and that Roman church is there because it's honoring something that's supposedly beneath it. I want to know what's supposedly beneath it, but you can't get to that without damaging what's already there. And so, we make the best choices we can with the information that we had, and maybe technology will continue to progress to a place where we really can X-ray the ground and see what's under there. I mean, I don't know what the future holds. That is not my specialty. The science, the science, the technology part of it. I struggle to use it. I certainly am not creating it. But yeah.
Well, okay. I'll walk this path, but you brought it up. The Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
Let's have a quick discussion about that.
Okay.
What happened to it? Where is it?
We don't know. So when it comes to artifacts like that, I want to look at what does the Bible actually say? And this is me as a believer. For me, let's start there. And the truth is, the Bible says absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It just disappears. It ceases to be mentioned. And so as far as traditions that developed about where it came to, you have to go into the Jewish Midrash. And so there are several stories about what may have happened to it. Probably the most popular is that Jeremiah spirited it away and that it is in a cave somewhere. I don't know. Is it, to me, it has always seemed likely that, the Babylonians came in, it got taken, it got destroyed, it got looted. I don't know. We don't know what happened to it. It has not been found. There are some charlatan, not real archaeologists out there who will tell you they have found it. It's not, they haven't, it's not out there. So you have those stories. Then the other popular tradition, maybe even the most popular tradition among Christians, is that it's potentially in Ethiopia. Yeah. And so the story there is that the Queen of Sheba and Solomon had a child together. And then because of that association, they ended up taking the ark with them, and that it is in this church in Ethiopia. No one's ever seen it. The doors have never been opened to it. And the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, they will make replicas of it. And so when you go to some Ethiopian Orthodox churches, sometimes you'll see models of it. But again, there's no proof. There's no evidence. According to that is not a biblical tradition. It's an extra biblical tradition. And so I think with those things, we just have to look at all the traditions and consider them and not be obsessed about finding it. Because one thing what I think about it, if it were ever found and it went into a museum, I would be the first in line to see it. Absolutely. But from a spiritual perspective, actually finding the Ark of the Covenant, what is that going to do truly for Bible believers? Finding that one super awesome object, what is it really going to do for us compared to the work of biblical archaeology generally, where we're learning about the people of the time and we're learning their traditions so that we can understand the language better. There are so many words. Not so many. There's maybe 50 words in the Hebrew Bible that are not used anywhere else. We don't know what they mean. Things are described in certain ways. Some of the furniture that is in the temple, the way that it's described, we don't really know what it looked like, but when you go out into the field, occasionally you'll find something that is like an aha moment, like, oh,
Oh,
this looks
that's
like
that.
what is being
Yeah.
described in Kings, or, and so as you understand the people better and the culture better, that actually does help us, because it helps us to understand the words and the scripture better. Whereas finding the Ark of the Covenant or finding Noah's Ark or some major thing like that, it wouldn't really help us with our interpretation, our understanding. It wouldn't bring us closer to God. It would just be spectacular. And I mean
Yeah.
that in a literal sense. It would be a spectacle.
Yeah. And look, I'm totally in agreement with that. Like, it's
Oh,
not
thanks.
that I don't want to see those, like you said, I'd be pushing people out of the way. You'd be pushing me out of the way.
Yeah.
But again, like, so what? Like, really,
Mhm.
push comes to, I don't know, it's almost a heretical thing to say. So what? It's kind of, it's not the point. And people
Yeah.
looking for, I always wonder too, because people who are looking for this forensic, beyond reasonable doubt proof
Mhm.
of Christianity. Look, I'm not asking you to agree or disagree. I think they're missing the point. Like, the way that you're going about it is the right way. It's like, okay, let's understand.
Thank you.
Let's do this. You're never going to prove this beyond reasonable doubt. That's
No.
not the God of the Bible. Reasonable doubt is woven into it. In fact, reasonable doubt in the existence of God as we understand him is a necessary prerequisite to love. Because, like, if he proved his existence beyond reasonable doubt, and chaps like Dawkins, who's brilliant, incidentally, I actually really like his book, you know, they would be forced to worship God purely out of sense of fear. Well, then, but that's not God as we know him. That's not a loving God. You can't have beyond reasonable doubt and a loving created God. You simply can't have those things.
No.
So there's people that are looking for it. It's not just that they're lacking faith; they're missing the point. It's like, dude, you're not getting it.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with that. With biblical archaeology, I've encountered a lot of people that what they will say to me before they've talked to me is, you're out there proving the Bible with archaeology. No, absolutely not. First off, as a believer, I don't think that we need to do that. I don't think that God is calling us to go out there and prove
No.
that everything in scripture is historically relevant or anything like that. I think it is very important that anyone, when working with sacred text, is very comfortable with the phrase, I don't know. As much as we find that helps us to understand scripture or anything like that, more is going to keep coming out of the ground. And then there are going to be things that never come out of the ground. And it's okay to say, I don't know, because it's in those places that I, as a Christian, when there's something in the Bible that I don't understand, then I want to lean into that. And for me, scripture is the way God primarily tangibly speaks to me. I interact with him there. He Based on the way that he created us, he wants a relationship with us.
Yeah.
And if he just, once a year held a press conference, told us, you're right, you're wrong, this is what we should be doing, all that kind of stuff, that's not a relationship. I think we're supposed to struggle with those things that we don't understand or that we don't completely know, because it's in those places that we give him the opportunity to speak to us and show us something different. And so having that, and that's something not you don't see a lot maybe in academia, is finding professors who are maybe willing to say, I don't know. Thankfully, there are a lot of them that are out there and are happy with that. But generally speaking, you want security in what you've written and what you believe and all of that. And I agree with you. I don't think that's the point. I don't think we're supposed to have security in our own ideas and our own understandings. We're supposed to lean on him and trust him. And then as we find things along the way that teach us more, make it a little bit more exciting, make him more real to us. That's why, to me, biblical archaeology exists. It's all about understanding him better, not confirming what I've been told or what I teach or anything like that.
You're right. He wants us to wrestle with him. That's part
Yeah,
of the relationship. It's
yeah,
you
absolutely.
push, he's going to push back. He's like that. That is going to happen. You're supposed to push forward the edge of your ignorance.
Yeah.
But of course, when you do that, it's like, I don't know if you've been in campfires, like, when you're in a campfire and you're there with the ring of light and you see everything enlightened, by, made visible by the campfire light. And then you look around and you go, oh, there's so much I can't see.
Yeah.
Then you kind of like realize that it's like, oh yeah, man, look, I can see this stuff and it's in high resolution and I get it. Wow. Look it's got
but I think we're supposed to be okay with that.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe it's, I mean, I would prefer to just control everything and manhandle everything in my life. That's kind of the way God wired me. I'm very like type A personality. But that's
ginger pride.
What he has.
It's a ginger thing.
It must be. But that's one place he really, really works on me, is in being willing to say, I don't know, and being okay. Now, not stopping with that, not just throwing up your hands and saying, well, I don't understand this and I'm never going to understand this, so I'm just going to move on from it. No, I think it's a challenge to us. I think we're supposed to lean into those places, but that's that healthy dose of humility that he is God and we are not. And I mean, that's just going right back to Genesis. The original sin was men and women wanting to know everything and become God themselves. If we knew everything, then I mean, that is the tree of knowledge. And so that is our original sin. That's what I think I fight against all the time, is me wanting to be God and know everything and control everything. That's not why I'm here. That's not why he created me.
But it kind of goes like into you can understand, I think, in a way that, look, and this is just my opinion, I'm not asking for validation here. I think in a way that we're reflecting God himself, because like, one of the reasons perhaps, and this is just the Maloney hypothesis, that because I'm also very good, I got to declare, I'm also very good friends with the local rabbi and go to his as often as I can. And there's this brilliant and ancient Jewish idea that, of course, God lacks nothing and wants for nothing and was not insufficient in any way. But yet God decided to create the world, which is limited and has all these limitations. And in that way, he kind of like, well, actually, obviously through the Messiah, when he put himself in there, born at this time, lived, died, the infinite became the finite. So that's right. That's the interplay between that. And that's wanting to be everything all the time. And that's kind of like that's kind of what God did. And that's kind of like what we're trying to enact, what the Father did as well. Like, and we do that when we create. So you come across a circumstance like this interview could have gone any particular way, like in not in a technical term, but in a practical way, it was infinite. Like anything could have happened. You know what I mean? Moderated by truth and driven by curiosity. Conversation turned out in a certain way. It was going to kind of like happen that way, and that's when we're reflecting God. Like, that's when we're doing that interplay between the finite. Look, because we're creating from infinite potentiality, we create a finite conversation. From when you go and dig something up, there is, again, not in the literal sense, but in technically, it's almost infinite what you could find. You could disprove, you could prove, you could anywhere in between. So yeah, there's that interplay between the finite and the infinite. And again, like, but that's reflected. I'm sorry, but that's reflected in so much too. Like exactly what you were talking about before, with this interplay between meaning and where meaning and fact conjoined. That you can tell when something's true, when you've got meaning and fact conjoined, because facts by themselves, it's like, so what? Like, there are literally billions of facts on the internet. It's like, so what?
Yeah.
Mentally, you've got to make meaning out of it, which means making a narrative. Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool what you're doing. Honestly, that's why I get gushy. I just so exciting. But look, so how good are those traditions? Like, you were talking before about some of the traditions. It's like, oh, well, this happened here. A lot of that would have been oral history, and I've had to do with Indigenous Australians who, as you know, were a pre-literate society with certain qualifications. It's not like the simplistic, oh yeah, they're always right, or no, they're always wrong. So when you consider their stories from the point of giving meaning as opposed
Mhm.
to a forensic description, they're surprisingly correct. Do you find,
Yes.
do you find that with biblical, with the traditions around with what you're doing?
Like the Byzantine churches and that sort of thing, like the traditions that
Are they
come
in the right
later,
place?
that
All
kind
right,
of
yeah.
thing?
Well, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I suppose so. Like, are they in the right? Like, are they in the right place? Like, because I know there's 3 places where the tomb of Christ is supposed to be. One of the most recent ones, English general, God bless him, whose name escapes me right now. Chap from Cups.
Um, the one in the East Talpiot tomb with the
Yeah, yeah,
ossuaries.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the naked archaeologist did a rather famous documentary about that one. Yeah, so there's the East Talpiot tomb, then of course the garden tomb, and then the tomb of the holy in within the Holy Sepulchre. So those are the 3 potential places for it. Um, so when it comes to Christian sites, um, first off, as biblical archaeologists, you will find most people, if they consider themselves biblical archaeologists, they focus on the Old Testament, because with the Old Testament, you're talking about hundreds and thousands of years when things could have developed. With the New Testament, you're talking about really only 100-ish years of stuff to find. And archaeologically speaking, 100 years is nothing. It's really hard to narrow in on something like that. So what happens with New Testament archaeology is it tends to actually err toward Greco-Roman. So you have people coming in and they are excavating the palaces of Herod and what the Romans left behind. So you are learning about what the first century looked like and what it looked like in the places that Christianity developed, but you're not finding physical evidence of Jesus.
Hmm.
And a lot of that is because he was only on earth for 33 years. But then also, when you look at what the Bible says about him, basically everything that is described are events. And it's pretty rare that an event is going to leave behind something completely tangible. When he's healing somebody, when he's drawing the demons out of Mary Magdalene, whatever the miracles are, when he's feeding the
Yeah.
multitudes next to the Sea of
You're
Galilee.
not going to
We know
find
where the
some
Sea
fish
of Galilee
skeletons.
is.
No fish skeletons.
You're just not. You're just not. And so when you get to Constantine, so Constantine becomes a Christian, and he sends this is, in the 300s, he sends his mother into the Holy Land, Helena, and she starts going around interviewing people, asking them what happened here. Well, so at best, that what they are describing to them had happened about 200 years earlier. Is it possible that an oral tradition of an event could have continued for 200 years? Yes, it's possible. But it's also possible that the word got out that, hey, the mother of the emperor is wandering around offering to spend tons of money anywhere she possibly can to build beautiful churches. Also, she's the mother of the emperor. We probably don't want to tell her no. We don't want to get in trouble. And so when you realize what was going on politically with what she's doing, it throws a little shadow over all of those potential sites. And so when a church gets thrown up in places, typically the archaeology can't happen underneath it. There are some places where it has. If you go into Nazareth, they just built a brand new church, the Church of the Annunciation, where the angel Gabriel told Mary that she was going to be carrying Jesus. There's actually 2 of those too. There's the Catholic one, and then there's the Orthodox one that's maybe 5 kilometers away. But they put up this beautiful church. Well, they're also in the process of excavating underneath it. So they have done all of the engineering work to keep the church supported on its foundations, but then you can actually go down and see what the first century ruins are like. And so I think there is an effort that's starting to be made to learn more about these sites beyond just what was the hearsay in the 300s. So that's kind of the situation there. One place that we're pretty confident Helena was absolutely wrong is the site of Cana, where Jesus turned water into wine. The historical site of Cana, the one that pilgrims have gone to for years and years, it was on a very heavily traveled road for anyone who was going between Nazareth and the Sea of Galilee. And so it was a very convenient location, the place that got pointed out as Cana. But within the last 10 years or so, archaeologists have actually found Cana. And there have been writings there, and there are various reasons for them to think that actually that traditional site is incorrect, and they found the real one. I believe it's about 20 kilometers north of it, somewhere in there, so not terribly far, but wrong.
Yeah.
So the archaeology and the tradition are not together. At the same time, that if it weren't for Constantine and his mother doing the work that they did, that helped to grow Christianity. And those are my Christian ancestors. I'm not Catholic, but at that time when everything was being built, prior to the Reformation, we all were Catholic, unless you were Orthodox. You were either Catholic or Orthodox. That was it.
Well, I mean,
so
even before the
split,
everybody was. Well, I mean, that history.
Yeah.
The history better than me. The argument between the Bishop of Constantinople and Bishop of Rome as to who has primacy and the
exactly
session. Yeah.
So that tradition still informs me. I still have a connection to that, and it doesn't bother me necessarily that these may not be these sites, because when I go to these churches or I visit any of these sites, for me, it's more about connecting with the thousands of years of pilgrims who have gone there themselves. And I think there's value in that too, in us just connecting with our Christian ancestors from all the different traditions that we have now.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Copts too, actually. I got to say, I have a deep admiration for them. But look, let's do a total geek thing. Act 9. Let's talk about him. And listeners, he's an ancient Egyptian pharaoh. Most of you would have heard of him. Trust me, stick with us on this conversation. Akhenaten is a really cool, important, influential pharaoh. I know you've heard of Tutankhamun, but Akhenaten is the man. So let's talk about him.
Yeah. So Tutankhamun's father, probably. There are some people who would say maybe not quite. But he was born Amenhotep III, and he was born to be the pharaoh, to be the head of the pantheon, to worship many gods, but the primary god at that time would have been Amun. And he decided, nope, that was wrong, that Aten was it. Aten was the one god, the only god. And so he made it a point during his reign to convert everybody in Egypt to worshiping only the god Aten. And as you can imagine, that did not go over well with the priests, who were very politically active at the time. And then the people too, who for their entire lives, had been worshiping in a certain way.
Yeah.
So he had, based on the sculptures that we have, and we don't have a lot of them, he seems to have had some serious medical problems. He did not live a long life. And so when he died, the priests came up and they made it their mission to basically destroy any evidence of him and revert the nation back to polytheism. And so he was in the process of building his new capital at Amarna. But they went in and tried to, literally you can go in and you can see the walls were there. Everything was scraped off, trying to just remove any trace of him that was left behind. Luckily, they were not 100% successful, because not we, but Egyptologists have been able to find some evidence of him and help us to understand him better.
Cancelled.
Completely. Yeah, literally. Yes. Yes.
Cancelled.
Yes. Totally.
Sorry.
No, yeah. Even his own son, because his son, what was Tutankhamun's name? Because they switched it back to put Amun in it. Tutankhaten. It was Tutankhaten. And so he dies, and then the priests just come in and they just take everything back over, and they erase him, not just with the nation and with his monuments, but even with his own family. So they tried to be really thorough. Luckily, they weren't completely successful.
But it's just incredible that really you think of this, and I know India has like an incredible, it too is one of the founts of human religion. But really, if kind of like from a Mediterranean-based religion, and Christianity is a Mediterranean-based religion, you're going to be influenced and there was an interplay. We don't think that there was an interplay between,
Oh yeah.
Between Egypt and Israel. I find it genuinely incredible that they were this close to monotheism. It almost happened. And imagine if the cult had have taken off. I reckon it'd still be here. Like if he could have held on for like 120 years, I reckon that would have kicked off, and it would still be like one of the Mithric religions or something like that are still, you still have these little cults in inverted commas that exist today. Like the fire worshippers in Iran, like the worship of Hura Mazda. It's just like, so close.
Yeah, true. And that, when people are trying to figure out when the Exodus happened, that is because, as we were saying at the beginning, Israel, compared to everyone around them, has very few historical records, whereas Egypt is obviously prolific in that way. The other places are too. And so what people try to do in trying to figure out when the Exodus happened is to go to the Egyptian records and look at their history and see what may or may not match up with what the Bible has. And him being monotheist, I mean, that's one of the places you start, is what kind of influence could that have potentially had on the Israelites who were living down there at the time. So I mean, you cannot underplay his importance in that way. And it's not clear cut. You don't see Aten and Amun and all that like appearing as characters in the Bible or anything like that. But just knowing that monotheism is there, the cultures were bumping up against each other. They were warring with each other. They were trading with one another. All of that has happened. And we find that especially the Philistines are actually a really great way to understand the interplay between them, because of when the Philistines came in and the way they were mercenaries for the Egyptians. Like, it was because of the Philistines coming in that there was a power that really started the shift of power away from the Canaanites, was with their entry in. So all of this works together. All of these little bits and pieces of history mean something, and we're still trying to figure out exactly how it all works together, but it's all important. And to me, it's all fascinating. It's something I never want to stop exploring.
That's right. I knew somehow you were going to bring it back to the Philistines, Amanda. Somehow it was gonna be in there. It's your thing.
Egypt. It happens. It happens.
You're in a safe space here. It's okay. There's no...
The Philistines have really been, they've been done wrong by history. They were great warriors and all of that, but a lot. I mean, just even the way we use that word these days for meaning, aggressive and stupid. Absolutely not. I mean, they were an impressive culture in and of themselves. So yes, we have to rehabilitate the Philistines.
Hashtag clear Goliath's name.
Yeah, that's right. Not quite, but yes.
But look, archaeology isn't your only thing, although it's the thing we kind of like know you most for. And here is your excellent website. I would recommend any of the listeners jump on there. Just Google redheaded archaeologist. So there's the little thing up top there. But you're also a published author, and you do health, and you speak. So if someone wants to contact you to get you, on a speaking tour, or they got any media contacts or anything, this is where they come. And could you tell us about the other things that you do, like some of your books, like with your Basset Hound that
Yes.
Okay,
I consider myself an author first. Honestly, I love writing. I feel like I communicate best through the written word, through longer format type things. And so, yes, all of my books are on there. And when I pitched the Red-Haired Archaeologist, my most recent is called The Red-Haired Archaeologist Digs Israel. And I mean that in literal and figurative ways. Digging, and even the redhead part mean both ways. The publisher there suggested that it would be fun to have a children's series to go along with it. And so the idea was, we have the book that is designed for, it's nonfiction designed for an adults, and Red-Haired Archaeologist Digs Israel follows a 2-week tour that I took around Israel with my family. After I finished digging in 2019, my husband and my parents came over and joined me, and they had never been before. So I toured them around to all the places I knew I needed to go to write the book. But I had the unexpected experience of seeing Israel for the first time again through their eyes. And so I ended up orienting the book around that trip. And so there's a lot of travel anecdotes and things like that in there, worked in with explaining these great archaeological sites. Our tour of Lachish, some places you've heard of, some places you haven't. Hebron, the chapter I have in there is probably my favorite. We got to go into the West Bank and visit Hebron, which was great. But anyway, the publisher thought it would be great to have something for kids too, so that the parents reading about archaeology and understanding what good archaeology is can share that with their kids. And so I just came up with this idea to make my basset hound Copper, the other redhead in the family, to make him this little archaeologist dog who travels with me on my fake adventures in Israel. So that's what we do. But it's also sort of a little bit based on truth too, because at Shimron, one of the dig directors, his name's Mario Martin, he's from Italy. And so he would he could drive to Israel, and he would bring his dog with him. And so when we were digging, anytime he and the dog would come over, everybody just freaked out, and everyone wanted to love all over the dog because we were all missing our own. So there are archaeologists who bring their dogs, not me, but it all works together to teach kids, the real history behind the Bible. So one of them is about the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the other one is about really the Nativity. So it's called Copper Finds a Manger. So explaining the differences between archaeologically what the Nativity would have looked like, what the Bible actually describes, as opposed to the way we celebrate it with our nativities today, which are really products of the Italian Renaissance. They have very little to do with scripture and even less to do with history.
Yeah, it's very medieval too. But that's not a bad thing. You can play out meaning, as long as you're playing out the meaning. Mm-hmm. You're always going to get that slight dissonance when you're seeking truth. You're going to get that slight dissonance between, where meaning and fact can join. That's where you're in complete truth. But how we're all Pontius Pilate to a certain degree, not knowing, And you've got to, like you said, you've got to admit, it's like, well, there are some things that I just can't.
I just don't know. And if you're like me and you've grown up reading the Bible, there's so much that I grew up thinking was in the Bible that actually isn't. They were traditions that were layered on top. And I realized really in grad school that it's so much harder when you're reading the Bible to realize what's not in there than what is in there. And for me, that's one way archaeology is really great, is because when you see something, it makes you think about things differently. Because when we're just reading our translations, we're reading it and we're imagining things as we understand them from our contexts today. And that's what's so great about archaeology, is it kind of shakes that up. And that's what I hope to do, is help people understand what the world of the Bible really looked like, understand it a little better, and ultimately fall in love with it and geek out about it as you and I have been doing tonight.
I know, it's kind of like, well, yeah. All right. Well, this has been really fantastic. Any more comments to wrap up on?
No, I don't think. Just thank you so much for doing this and geeking out with me. I can talk about this stuff all night.
Don't tempt me. I'm telling you.